All right, here we go, guys. Before we move on to slope with linear functions, let's finish up these two problems on quadratic functions. Did anybody figure out the answer to number 1? -7, exactly. How did you know that? Yes, Dylan. Yes, okay. You are looking for a zero of the function. What does f of x mean? Y. So they basically said, hey, when x is 3, y is 0. Find the other time that happens. And it's showing right here. This is a zero of the function. This is where the y value is 0. The x value that created that is -7. Guess what some kids picked? Yeah, some kids looked down here. They knew there was a 0 involved somehow. But this is not an x-intercept. This is not a 0 of the function. Do y'all know what this is? This is the y-intercept, and that's not a 0 of a function. A 0 of a function is when the output is 0. These are the values of the function. The y values are always the values of the function. Those are the answers to the function, basically. The x values are kind of like the questions that got you the answer. Okay, so a 0 of the function, you can sometimes find it right in the t-chart. When the y value is 0, that's a 0 of the function. All right, number 2 should not have been that bad. Okay, an axis of symmetry has to be right through the middle of a function, right? So if these 2 points are on a quadratic function, find the middle. The middle point would be right here. Now, I don't know exactly what the vertex is, but I do know where the middle of the function is. And that means I know something about the function. What is the axis of symmetry here? X equals -1. That's the line, the vertical line that goes right through the middle of the function. It also tells me part of the vertex. What part of the vertex do I know? The x value. Do I know the y value? No, but that's not what it was asking. We don't have enough information here to find the y value, but we certainly can find the middle of the function. And we can write the axis of symmetry like a vertical line. X equals -1. And this axis of symmetry, somewhere along it, the vertex would have to fall somewhere on that axis of symmetry. So those are 2 questions you will be expected to know how to do. We're going to go over the quiz that we took in just a minute, but let's just review, especially for those who were absent. We took a quiz involving a rocket going up in the air and coming back down to the ground. What kind of question would I ask you about this point right here? What is that point first? That's the vertex. What kind of question would I ask you in regards to a vertex? The maximum height. If I'm asking you for the maximum height, what part of the vertex am I asking for? Just the y value. The maximum height means I want the y value. If I ask you the time it took to get there, what am I asking? That's the x value of the vertex. Okay, what am I asking about if I ask you about this point right here? That's how long it was in the air. How long in the air? Ladies, I'm not in the mood for silliness today. Okay, so if I want to know how long was it in the air, that's a x-intercept question. What if I ask about this point right here? The height that it was launched from. This is where it started. This started off the ground. It was on some kind of platform. And then there's other questions I could ask as well. We're going to go over that quiz in a minute. Today we're moving on to linear functions, which this should be a review. So today's lesson, I'm going to go pretty quick. Linear functions don't have exponents. Do y'all remember the form of a linear function? Y equals mx plus b. What did m stand for? Slope. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Slope. How to find it numerically, possibly how to find it from a picture, if we have time, and also what slope tells us about a line. It gives us a lot of information about a line. It's kind of like the value of a when we were looking at quadratic functions. A controls a whole lot on a quadratic function. Remember how a can make it open up or down, and it can make it skinny or wide, narrow or wide. Slope is kind of the same deal. It can make the line go up or down, And it can also make it, we don't call it skinny or fat, we call it flat or steep. Okay, so the slope is a very important numerical value that tells us a lot about the line. Okay, so let's write that down. Slope. It is a number. Please do not tell me that slope has x in it. Slope does not have an x in it. Slope is just a number. Where is it usually found? In front of x. If the line is in this form. There's lots of different forms for a line. This is the one you're probably familiar with from last year. This is called slope-intercept form. And the reason it's called slope-intercept form is because we can see the slope by looking at it, and we can see the intercept by looking at it, the y-intercept. You should be writing this down. Okay, so slope is a number that describes the direction, that means up or down, and the steepness of a line. Slope is a number that describes the direction and the steepness of a line. Now, today, your assignment, I'm going to give you 2 points, and your job is to find the slope between those 2 points. A line is so much more simple than a parabola. All you need to make a line is 2 points. A parabola needs much more than 2 points. And it doesn't matter what 2 points. On a parabola, you really need some special points like vertex and intercepts, but not on a line. Any random 2 points will work. And if you know 2 points on a line, you can find the slope, and you can eventually get to the equation. We're going to get there too. Okay, so can I erase this? Because we got a lot more to talk about with slope. Now, I want to talk to you about how we would mathematically find the slope. There is a formula for finding slope. Also, there's a verbal description for finding slope. I don't know why they use the letter M, but they do. Why does it keep doing that? Have you ever heard slope described as rise over run? Write that down, please. Now, what affects rising on a point? The y values. And what affects the running, the left and right business? The x values. So sometimes you'll see this as the change in the y's compared to the change in the x's. The triangle symbol is sometimes used to describe change. Change in y's over change in x's. Write this down, please. Now, mathematically, how do we find that? Very good. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Those little 2's and 1's are called subscripts. Why do we need them? Well, sometimes I get lazy and I just do this. Y minus y over x minus x, and that really is lazy. That's not really technically correct. Why? Well, first of all, what would y minus y always be? 0. And what would x minus x always be? 0. So the reason why we need these little subscripts is to remind us that these are 2 different y values and 2 different x values. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to subtract big minus small. Absolutely not. But you do have to stay consistent. Like sometimes you could even write it like this. y1 minus y2, but then the bottom would have to say x1 minus x2. So let's talk about some places where kids end up messing up here. First of all, not staying consistent. Whatever y value you start with, you must start with the x value on the bottom of that same point. Also, subtracting negatives can get tricky. Also, what else do you think kids might accidentally do? This happens a lot. Well, they might switch, like do the y2 minus y1, but on bottom do x1 minus x2. That's not allowed. They put the x's on top. That's the most common mistake I see. The y's have to go on top, which is not normal. We're used to always dealing with x's first because that's the first part of a point. But for slope, you got to look at the y's on top, not the x's. So does this all look familiar? Okay. let's see. Let's look at this flip chart. There's some neat parts to this flip chart on slope. Okay. We're also going to talk about special kinds of slope, like when slope is 0 and undefined. So those are two of the strange cases that might come up, and you got to know what that means. We got to know slope formula, which we just talked about, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And today on your homework, I'm going to give you 2 points, and you're going to tell me slope, and you're going to tell me a description of the line based on that number. Just knowing the slope number tells you about the line. Okay, first of all, let's talk about negative and positive. Look at this line right here. This purple one on the snow. Is that a negative slope or a positive slope? It is definitely a negative slope. And I still have kids who get confused by looking at a picture. Negative slopes go down. Now I say go down, and I mean as you are reading left to right. Just like you read a sentence. You read a line like you do a sentence. Because I have some kids who tell me, but it's going up on this side. But that's like reading it backwards. Okay, you want to move your eyeballs across the page, and as soon as you get to the line, you want to keep moving forward. Well, if I want to keep moving forward, I'm going to slide down. This is definitely a negative slope right here. What about this one on this roof? That's a positive slope. This line is going up as I move to the right. What about this dirt? That's a negative slope. Are you with me? So just by looking at a picture, you should identify if it's positive or negative. Oh, let's see what this slide does something. Let me see if I can remember. Oh, what kind of slope would this be? These lines on this figure. That would be negative. They're going down. I'm talking about these lines. Okay, what about this slope? That'd be positive. Oh, I don't know about that. What about this one? Negative. What about this one? Positive. All right. Okay. What kind of slope is this? Negative. What about this? Positive. Now here comes two of the tricky situations. This is something we're going to put in our notes in just a minute. Look at this line right here. This is a vertical line. Remember we talked about vertical lines when we did axis of symmetry. Vertical lines are outlaws, right, Mia? That means they don't follow any of the rules. Look at what it says for their slope. Undefined. That's important. They don't have a slope. Please do not tell me that their slope is 0. That is not true. Undefined slopes are vertical lines. Undefined is a vertical line. Say it with me. Undefined is a vertical line. Absolutely. And then these type of lines. How would we describe this line right here? Okay, but what kind of line is this? Horizontal. Horizontal lines have slopes. Please do not tell me they don't. The only kind of line that doesn't is a vertical, and it's called undefined. This absolutely has a slope, and it is 0. That's important, and you do have to know that. Okay, shall we just do some examples? There's some problems hiding somewhere in here. Where are they? Oh, no, pictures. What kind of slope is this? 0. This has a slope of 0. You see it? It's horizontal. Where are they? Here's one. What kind of slope is this? Negative, because it's going down. What kind of slope is this? Positive. Negative. Positive. I know there's one more in there. Identify the slope. Oh, here we go. What is this? Undefined. Undefined. Undefined's a vertical line. You got to know that. Okay, so find the slope of the line that contains these points. I'm giving you 2 points, -3, 6, and 2, 4. That's what your homework will look like. You're not going to be given pictures. You're going to be given 2 points, and your job is to find the slope between those 2 points. You do it by doing y minus y over x minus x. Now, you have a choice. What are my 2 y values? 4 and 6. I can either do 6 minus 4, or I could do 4 minus 6. Either way, you would get the same answer. Let's do 6 minus 4 first. If I choose to do 6 minus 4, then what does the denominator have to be? It has to be negative 3 minus 2. Do you see what I'm talking about? If I start with this y value on top, I must start with this x value on bottom. Okay, so what is 6 minus 4? 2. And what's negative 3 minus 2? Now, this has a negative slope. How do I know it's negative? Yeah, because there's a negative sign only in one place. If I had had negative signs in both places, what would happen then? That would mean it's really positive. How do I want you to write this answer? I prefer you, if you've got a negative slope, I really prefer it on top or out to the front. But technically, the negative sign could be anywhere on the fraction. Top, bottom, or out into the front of the whole fraction. I prefer this way or this way. Now, let's talk about this. If we had done it the other way. Remember I told you the order you subtract doesn't matter, and that's true as long as you stay consistent. What if I had chosen to do 4 minus 6 on top? That's perfectly fine. But what would the bottom have to be? 2 minus negative 3. So if I want to start with this y value, that's perfectly fine. I'm sorry, the other one. If I want to start with 4 and subtract 6, then I've got to do 2 minus negative 3 on the bottom. You'd still get the same answer. What's 4 minus 6? Negative 2. What's 2 minus negative 3? Positive 5. Did I still get the same answer? Yes. Now, let's talk about the description of the line. The negative sign tells you something important. What do you know about this line? What do you know about the shape of the line, though? Remember, the slope tells us whether it's going up or down. So is this line going up or down? This line is going down. Now, it also tells us if it's steep or flat, and we haven't talked about that yet. We're about to do that. But I'm just going to tell you this line would be considered flat. Why would it be considered flat? Not because of the negative sign. When you are talking about steep or flat, you take the negative sign off. You just look at the digits. Is it rising more or is it running more? It's running more. If it's running more, it's going to be flat. If it's rising more, it's going to be steep. Okay, slope is rise over run. So in other words, you take the sign off because you don't ever want to consider the sign when you're talking about steepness. Sign only affects up or down. What you want to do is look at the top compared to the bottom. If the top is smaller, that means you've got a fraction, and fractions make you flat. Kind of like fractions make you fat when you're talking about a parabola. If the top is bigger, then it's rising more than it's running, and that's when it would be steep. Okay, and we're going to look at some examples. Let's switch over to blank grids here. Okay, and I do want to put some of that in your notes too, some of that information that we just talked about. We already discussed that slope tells us the direction and the steepness. Okay, so for your homework tonight, if your slope is a positive number, that means it's greater than 0. What are you going to tell me about the line? It's going up. If your slope equals a negative number, that means your slope is less than 0. Then what are you going to tell me about the line? It's going down. Okay, so two of the words you're going to give me are up or down. It's either going to be positive or negative. You're going to tell me if it's going up or down. There will be a couple of exceptions, and that's when you've got a horizontal or a vertical line, and we'll talk about that too. Okay, let's talk about steepness or flatness. First of all, for steepness or flatness, again, you want to look at the slope, but you want to take the sign off of it. Sign does not affect if it's steep or flat. Okay, the actual value of the slope with the sign taken off of it, if it's bigger than 1, that's when you're going to be steep. If you look at slope and take the sign off of it, if it's less than 1, that's when you are considered more on the flat side. If you are 1, good question. Kind of like on a parabola. Remember we talked about how the parent is perfect? If the a value is 1, we say that it's not skinny or fat, it's just right in the middle. Same thing with the line. If the slope is exactly 1, that means it's rising and running the exact same amount. We're just going to call that neutral. It's right in the middle. It's not steep, it's not flat, it is right in the middle if your slope is exactly 1. Okay, so let's look at 1. Here's some points on a line. This is actually the parent function for all lines. What's the slope of this line? 1. How would I get from this point to this point using... I would rise 1, run 1. Rise 1, run 1. Up 1, over 1. Okay, or I could even go from this point all the way up to this point. Let's talk about how I would do that. If I want to go from here to here, I would go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So do you see how my rise and my run number are always the same on this kind of function right here? So you would say neutral. Now, is this slope positive 1 or negative 1? It's a positive 1. So if my slope ends up being exactly 1, then the two words you're going to tell me, one of them's up. Why is it up? Why is it up? Because it's positive. And then you're going to tell me neutral. Why is it neutral? Because it equals exactly 1. It's not steep or flat. It's just right in the middle. If it's a fraction that's less than 1, it's flat, yes. And if it's any number that's greater than 1, regardless of the sign, then it's steep. Okay, so let's do some examples. I'm going to show you exactly what I expect to see here. I'm going to give you 2 points. We're going to find the slope, and we're going to describe that slope with the words steep or flat, up or down, and possibly it might be neutral. Here's a point. This is at -3, +2. And let's do this point down here, which is at 0, -4. On the homework, you're not going to have a picture or anything. You're just going to have 2 points. Like, let's call this point P. Point P is -3, 2. And point Q is 0, -4. And your job is, first of all, to determine mathematically what the slope is. Second of all, you're going to tell me what that slope tells me about this line. Is it going up or down? Is it steep or flat? Or it might be neutral. Okay, so we can actually count it out from the picture, but I want us to focus on the mathematical way to find slope. How do you mathematically find slope? Y minus y over x minus x. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we have a choice. On top, we could either do 2 minus -4 or -4 minus 2. Do you see where I'm getting those numbers? Those are my y values. What do you want to do? I would rather do 2 minus -4 personally. Why? What happens when you subtract a negative? It becomes positive. Now, because I chose to do 2 minus -4, then on the bottom I have to do -3 minus 0. Do you see what I'm saying? My other choice would have been -4 minus 2 over 0 minus -3. Either way, you're going to get the same answer. Let's see what we get. This is 6 over -3, which is what? -2. If I had done it this way, I would have gotten -6 over +3. 0 minus -3 is +3, and guess what that equals? -2. So this is what you're going to tell me on your homework. You're going to show me where you did the subtraction. You're going to tell me the slope is -2, and then you're going to tell me 2 words about that line. Is it going up or down? Down. How do I know it's going down? Because the slope is negative. Is it steep or flat? This would be on the steep side. And the way I know it is steep is I don't look at the negative sign. I just look at the 2. Absolute value just means you just look at the 2. Is that bigger than 1 or smaller than 1? Bigger than 1. That means this is going to be kind of steep. Now look over here at the picture. I know you probably won't have graph paper, but we could also count this out from the picture. And again, you always want to move forward. So here's point P, here's point Q. I need to move from P to Q. I don't want to go from Q to P. Why? That's going backwards. I want to go forward. So to get from here to here, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and over 1, 2, 3. I went down 6 and to the right 3. Doesn't that equal -2? And then connect the dots. You can kind of tell just from looking at it. This one's going to be kind of steep. It's going down quickly. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, let's see. Here's point P. It is at 1, -2. Point Q is at 4, 1. Let's numerically find the slope. Then let's describe the line based on that slope value. How am I going to find the slope? Y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You do that right now, please. And again, you pick the order, but you got to stay consistent. And it's very easy to get messed up on your signs when you're subtracting negatives. I don't mind if you use a calculator, but please at least show me what you subtracted on top and what you subtracted on bottom. And then if you want to turn to your calculator and punch it in just to be safe, that's fine with me. But at least show me what digits you would write down. What could I put on top? 1 minus -2 or -2 minus 1. It doesn't matter, but you got to subtract the y values on top. Since I did -2 minus 1 on top, I'm going to have to do 1 minus 4 on bottom. I'm getting -3 over -3. So what is that slope? 1. Now, what does that tell me about the line? It's positive, which means it's doing what? It's going up. Absolutely. Look at the graph. This line is absolutely going up. It's positive, so it's going up. How would I describe the steepness? I would say it's neutral because it's exactly 1. It's rising and running the exact same amount. I'm rising 1, running 1, rise 1, run 1, rise 1, run 1. Or rise 3, run 3. When the rise and run are equal, we say that's a neutral slope. Okay, now, be careful. I don't want you to say if m is greater than 1, it's steep. You got to be careful here. Because let's say I had a slope of -5. Is -5 greater than 1? No. So it's not just m, it's the absolute value of m. If the absolute value, that means if it's negative, you just take off the negative. If that's bigger than 1, then absolutely it's steep. Okay, so I don't want you to get confused with negatives. Negatives do not affect steepness. Negatives just tell you up or down. Good question. Okay, now we did a steep one, we did a neutral one. Let's try to do a flat one here. Okay, here's point P, here's point Q. Now you won't have pictures, you'll just have points. Point P is at -3, +3, and point Q is at 1, 2. I just want to show you visually what a flat line would look like. Numerically, you're going to find slope. And then you're going to tell me, is it steep or flat? Is it going up or down? How would I find slope numerically here? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Pick a point, start with it, subtract the y's on top, subtract the x's on bottom. So what did y'all put on top? 3 minus 2. What has to go on bottom then? -3 minus 1 has to go on bottom. Because I started with this y value, I've got to start with this x value. So what is 3 minus 2? +1. What's -3 minus 1? -4. Right? And if you're not good with subtracting negatives, then by all means use your calculator. 3 minus 2 is 1, and -3 minus 1, that turns into -3 minus -1. Remember? That's two negatives, that's -4. I mean plus negative 1. Okay, now, if your slope is negative, I prefer you to move the negative sign to the top. So even though technically this slope is negative 1/4, and that can be written 3 different ways. Negative 1 over 4, 1 over negative 4, or even the negative sign out to the front of the whole fraction. I really prefer it either this way or this way. I don't like it when you leave the negative on the bottom. I just don't. That's not how they never show a negative fraction like that on an answer column with the negative on the bottom. Okay, now, so this is what I would prefer to see. The slope, after you did your math here by doing y minus y over x minus x, you would report the slope is negative 1/4. Now you're going to tell me what that means about this line. It's going down. How do I know it's going down? Because of the negative. Would I say it's steep or flat? It's flat. It's flat because 1/4, 1 is greater than 1/4. Okay, so if it's smaller than 1, then it's going to be flat. Again, and I'm talking about the absolute value, not the sign. And just look at the picture. Doesn't this look more on the flat side than on the steep side? Because guess what it's doing? It is running more than it's rising. If the bottom is bigger than the top, then it is going to be flat, and that means it's a fraction. Okay, so we did a steep. We did a flat. We did a neutral. Here are your 2 special cases. Before we do a special case, I want you to try this problem in your calculator. 7 divided by 0. Try that in your calculator. It does not say 0. If it says 7, if you put in 7 divided by 0 and it says 0, something is horribly wrong. It should say error. Because guess what you are never, 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 never allowed to do in math? You are never allowed to divide by 0. That's like one of the 10 commandments of math. Thou shalt not divide by... Thou shalt not divide by 0. It's not allowed, it's not defined, it's not normal, a calculator won't do it, you just can't do it, folks. So, when you get a 0 on the bottom of your fraction, guess what that's going to tell you? It's a vertical line and it's undefined. Vertical lines are outlaw lines, they don't follow any rules. They are not functions. They don't even have slopes. Their slopes are called undefined. So let's look at that situation because it could happen on your homework. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 points. Pretend like you can't see a picture of them. Point P is at 2, 3. And point Q is at 2, negative 1. Now, again, we don't have a picture, so I can't see that these 2 dots are making a vertical line. All I have is my brain and my knowledge of how to find slope, which is y minus y over x minus x. So, I look at those 2 points. I set up my slope. Tell me how I would set up the slope for this one. 3 minus negative 1. Over 2 minus 2. It really doesn't matter what happens on the top. What is 3 minus negative 1? 4 over 0. Alarms should be going off in your head. You are breaking a commandment right here if you try to divide by 0. If this happens to you, what would you tell me the slope is? Undefined. If you try to divide by 0 in your calculator, it's going to tell you error. You need to know that means I can't do that. It's not allowed. It's undefined. What kind of line is that then? Vertical. So you're not going to worry about telling me up or down, steep or flat. Undefined is a vertical line. So if that situation happens to you, these are the 2 answers you're going to give me. You're going to tell me the slope on this one ended up being undefined, which tells me right away, outlaw line, it's a vertical line. Okay, and then one last special case. This is exactly what I would want to see for this kind of problem. Okay. Look at this one. Alright, I'm thinking of 2 points. Pretend like you can't see a picture of them. Point P is at -3, +2. Point Q is at -1, +2. And your job is to find the slope and describe this line for me, please. Now, how do you find slope? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So how would I set up my digits here? 2 minus 2 over -3 minus -1. What's 2 minus 2? 0 over -2. You would either get 0 over 2 or 0 divided by -2. It doesn't really matter. It depends on the order you subtracted. Is this allowed? Try it in your calculator. Can you divide into 0? Absolutely. What is the slope of this line? 0. 0 is a number, so if you tell me this is undefined, that is not correct. This is defined, and it is the slope of 0. It's only undefined if the 0's on the bottom. If the 0's on the top, that's perfectly normal, logical, allowed. It is definitely a function. It's definitely a line. It's a normal line. Now, what does that tell you about this line? All lines are straight. It's horizontal. So that's the only description you would have to give me in that case. It's not steep or, well, it's not steep at all. It's completely flat because it's completely horizontal. It's not going up or down. It's completely flat. So if you end up with a slope of 0, you only need to give me one description, and that would be horizontal. All right, I want you to try some examples, just a couple. Let's go back to our flip chart. Where did it go? All right. Here's a problem for you. Find the slope that connects these 2 points right now. Go. I'm going to race you on your mark. Get set. Go. Write it down. I'm writing it down up here. I'm going to beat you. You don't care. That's because you know I'm going to win. Okay. Dylan, I'm totally already done and you haven't even begun. Grammarly correct? You mean grammatically correct? All right. Dylan, my goodness. Get on my level. All right. I'm tired of waiting on Dylan. Who found the slope out there? Jason, what'd you get? 2/3. It's absolutely positive 2/3. Now, on your homework, I do want you to simplify it. I ended up with -4 over -6, the order that I subtracted. And I know a negative over a negative is really positive, and 4 over 6 reduces to 2/3. I do want it in lowest terms. Now, I also expect a description of the line. What are the 2 words you would tell me? It's going up because it's positive. It is flat because it's less than 1. It's a fraction less than 1. That's what I want to see on your homework. All right, try this one. These are coming out randomly. Look at this. Yes, and Dylan, you better hurry. This one would be undefined. It's y minus y over... Wait, is this one undefined? Negative 2 minus negative 5 over negative 5 minus negative 5. It's either going to be negative 7 or positive 7 depending on... No, I'm sorry, not 7. Well, the top really doesn't matter. This would be 3 over 0. So, the word you would tell me here would be undefined. Now, what kind of line is that then? Vertical. That would be the two answers. Guys, stay with me, please. That's the two answers I would expect to see. It's an undefined slope, which means it's a vertical line. Well, there is no slope. The actual slope is... Yeah, for the rest of them, I need an actual slope, and I need a description of what that line means. Now, again, what if the slope was 1? What would you tell me? Up and neutral. What if the slope is negative 1? What would you tell me? Down and neutral. Remember, steep or flat compares itself back to 1. So keep that in mind. Alright, your homework is page 304, 1 to 9. You got to find the slope and you've got to give me a description of the line based on the slope. What if what? Okay, if it's horizontal, then horizontal and vertical lines don't need two words. They just need either horizontal or vertical. So if you end up with a slope of 0, your only description will be horizontal. If you end up with a slope that's undefined, your only description will be vertical. Because those are special cases. Good question.